terms of HR tech. So that's what we do. And, AI is a new electricity. So it's great to be part of the panel today. And let's talk about some cool stuff. I love robotics, love quantum computers. My next article in Forbes is on quantum.
Absolutely. Let's just discuss some cool stuff, as Gary said, and welcome all of you to the Friday episode of VCTV. Okay, before I start with the questions and asking opening remarks from each of you, I'd like to give a little bit of stats which I just received, which I just gathered from the internet. The World Economic Forum concluded in a recent report that a new generation of smart machines fueled by rapid advances in AI and robotics could potentially replace a large population of existing human jobs. So robotics and AI will cause a serious double disruption as the coronavirus pandemic pushed companies to fast-track the deployment of new technologies to slash costs, enhance productivity, and be less reliant on real-life people. Management consulting giant PwC reported AI, robotics, and other forms of smart automation have the potential to bring great economic benefits, contributing up to $15 trillion to global GDP by 2030. So these are some of the stats that I gathered, and I am a little surprised, but in a good way. I think if humans are going to lose jobs, I think probably with upskilling, we are going to get into another sector of jobs. I don't know. I mean, this is why our speakers are going to enlighten us with the topic. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Right. Let's start the panel now with a little background. It's kind of interesting. Let's start with Raghu first. Hi, Raghu. I just want to know your opening remarks. I mean, I just shared a YouTube video with the group today where Amazon is like totally the Amazon robotics. I visually saw that video. I was amazed. I mean, how it has completely replaced human beings in the warehouse section. The robots are really everywhere. They're just getting stuff moved from one place to other. They're packaging, and the humans are actually controlling everything, but there are less number of humans. So let's start, because you are in the US. Let's start with what happened in 2020. Like many people in US lost their jobs, just like others in the rest of the world. So let's start with you with the opening remarks for the topic.
Sure. Thank you, Sunny. I think, we are in the middle of a disruption. Of course, the pandemic has accelerated certain things. Certain things were temporarily kind of shelved because of the pandemic as well. But in terms of robotics and AI, I think it's been going on for the last couple of years. And there will be disruption in terms of jobs, but it will be asymmetric in terms of geography, in terms of background. It's kind of very similar to when the PC, the personal computer, was introduced back in 1984. Some of us on the panel are much younger than us, but I was there. In fact, I arrived in the US in 1984, right at the cusp of when it came out. And so it's a similar kind of thing. They said everything, all jobs will be gone. And, so I think there will be a lot of disruption, but over time, some of the technology will become, packaged so that not everybody has to become like a AI expert in terms of programming, but they will all, it will be at different stages. There will be new jobs created as well, but it will be very disruptive for sure in the next, decade. And I think there will be, areas where, AI and robotics cannot replace, things that involve certain types of jobs, which require the quirks that humans have, right? So it is just, I think it'll take a period of adjustment for it to happen. Obviously, things like, repeatable jobs like the warehousing and things like that will be replaced soon, at least in many geographies where it makes sense. There is a cost factor as well. But the most important thing I want to point out in this for discussion here is the bias AI is kind of a lot of the AI as well as some of the robotics will be based on the data that is given to it, how it is trained, and there is inherent bias in terms of what is given to it, and so that's very important because there may be cultural mismatches, depending on what type of data is actually used to program things.
Interesting opening remarks. Thank you, Raghu. Harsh, would like to hear some opening remarks coming from you on the topic.
Sure, thanks. So definitely, we definitely see that a lot of the menial tasks, as was pointed out earlier, will definitely be taken over by AI. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because what would happen is once those, we tend to feel that this could affect jobs a lot, but that may not be the case, because what might happen is since those menial jobs are taken care of, we could be thinking of something more bigger and better that can be done, and the manpower which is now being freed from doing those menial tasks can now be assigned to those better tasks. So anyways, I see it as a very positive opportunity for us to even advance the civilization technologically even further than what we've accomplished in the last 50 years. So just to give you an example, there are several companies in the AI space, specifically in the healthcare space like Cure.ai or AI Doc. What they've done is they've practically automated the reading of a radiology scan. So the accuracy with which they can predict, they can read a scan and predict the diagnosis is almost up to 80 to 90%. So what that does is the basic things which can be now taken care of by radiologists, it frees up time for them, and they can actually work with the doctors much more hands-on to get more better diagnostics, get more advanced diagnostics done. In fact, Cure.ai, which is an Indian-based startup, what they did was they were scanning chest X-rays, and they were able to see the progression of how COVID was expanding into the lungs of patient. To that extent, they could predict that the penetration was 20%, 30%, 50%. They could go up to those details. So that is definitely where I see, AI could be extremely beneficial for us in the longer run.
Right. Thank you, Harsh. I'd like to know from Ajay, who just joined us after a long time. Ajay, is it only the menial jobs which we are giving away to the robots and the AI? Or do you think the blue collar jobs might also be at risk?
I think most jobs will get affected, and the question would be how much would they get affected? But as Harsh pointed out, it's part of the civilization growth, right? We were hunters earlier. We have come to starting to use computers. We would use deep technology to solve some of our problems more effectively, and might be enhance our creativity. Our creativity still needs a lot of room. There is a lot of bandwidth to use. So I think, like for example, an endless job today, which is not necessarily menial, can still be resolved by a lot of AI algorithms, right? And you would think most, even Harry Potter could be conjured up by an AI tech. Right? So now, whether that will come to that is a question, but that might be something possible. But I think the creativity levels of humans will increase as we go along that route.
Interesting. Karthik, over to you next, please, with your opening remarks.
So I think the belief that robotics and AI will change the future, and it has not already changed, is a misnomer. With 7 billion humans on this planet, we already exist with 1.6 billion robots around us. We are in the sixth generation of robotics, where the only thing that is left is a robot talking to a robot taking an order from a robot, and a robot reporting into a robot. But what that has done is, and I would take a cue from what Raghu said and Harsh said, in terms of cycle of evolution, it has only made things easier. Efficiencies are improving, quality and finesse at work is improving. Imagine if Japan were to operate with the same level of efficiency that the human beings were operating, it would be producing 27 to 30% of its GDP or output every year, compared to the kind of automation that it has done. Automation is required in certain sectors to ensure that efficiencies, productivity, turnaround, dollar inputs, etc., are improvised, and overall GDP needs to be built upon. Robotics today has made a lot of inroads into healthcare, into transportation, into warehousing and supply chain solutions, but it still hasn't been democratized to your tier 2 and tier 3 geographies, which is typically your developing nations. And that is which is the bottom of the pyramid that we're talking about. While it is good for Tesla to make a driverless or an Apple to make a driverless car, it is important for us as a globe, as a world, to see when would a country in Africa or when would a country in India or when would a geography in India be able to afford, democratize, and make sure because that is where at the bottom of the pyramid, menial tasks, low quality tasks, and low productivity tasks are maximum. So if that level of automation is able to improve upon the skill sets of the people, free up resources for further development, then the capitalistic structure of GDP growth coming from the bottom of the pyramid would impact quality of life. Otherwise, it would continue to be an evolution limited to the top 5% of the world, and it might not bring about a lot of change. So while robotics and AI is important, cost, technology, affordability, and reach is going to define when and how much change would it bring about in people's lives and quality of life.
So I have a very intriguing question after you said that, like low quality job and menial jobs in India. Obviously, we know India is, we have those people. But if AI was to replace those kind of jobs, then what are these people going to do? Just a question.
So let's say 1,000,000 years ago, human beings were cutting trees and they were traveling on foot. And then wheel was invented or wheel was discovered, whatever you want to say. Now that freed up a lot of time and people could use wheel to do a lot of other things. Exactly the same way, when people are no longer ticket checkers, people are no longer delivery boys, people are no longer warehouse operators, or they are no longer fitters on a car assembly line, they might find a lot more opportunities in different sectors which haven't been explored. Improving efficiencies in agriculture, improving efficiencies in education, improving efficiencies in social infrastructure, improving efficiencies in construction and real estate, which is the real economy, needs to be strengthened. And more importantly, as the quality of life improves, or as the quality of a capitalistic structure improves, that is where infrastructural development would start coming in.
Oh, great points. These are all positive. In fact, the way I see it.
So I wouldn't look at it as a doom. I wouldn't look at it as a doom. If we would have looked at it as a doom, last 50 years of industrial revolution wouldn't have happened. The only reason why we today fancy robotics is because of the element of artificial intelligence, where a robot can think on its own. Otherwise, robotics has been in place in China and Japan all the way for last 5 to 6 decades, and it's always impacted our lives. But then, if we are to use, and if Toyota has to sell 6 to 7 million cars every year, they cannot have human beings make those many cars.
Yeah,
they need robots to make that. That's how the world operates.
Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that, Karthik. Gary, over to you, please, with the opening remarks with a very interesting topic and very close to your heart: artificial intelligence, robotics, and quantum computing, maybe.
Yeah. So, look at where we are today. In the beginning of the 20th century, and I've talked about this a few times, we look at what happened with electricity. And over the next 30 years, it fundamentally changed our lives. So I wrote an article that I sent over in 2017 about, robotics and RPA and jobs being taken over and universal basic income. But things have changed fundamentally. AI is already touching many, many parts of our lives. We use Google every day, Facebook, LinkedIn. Here we are in Zoom. So it's already there. It's not like it hasn't happened. And we talk about how the jobs will change. Think about it: driverless trucks and waste management, RPA and low value jobs. But what we forget is that as we start to move up the scale to unsupervised AI, the systems can start making decisions for us. And I actually just got a note from my friend's house. My billionaire friend has put my partner has put AI in his house called Morpheus, and it actually controls everything. It actually has a pet dog at the level. So our lives are fundamentally going to change. One is we'll have smart assistants to help make our lives better, and then we'll move to intelligent assistants. And one of the things Karthik talked about is when robots start to talk on a peer-to-peer kind of basis, which has already started, right? It's not like yesterday's news. And then start making decisions. challenge is, and we've talked about this a few times too, what happens when, we can process about 60,000 complex transactions per day in our brain. And, I'm a clinical psychologist also. And, we look at that, that's an amazing feat. But, based on Moore's law, what happens in the not too distant future when the AI can now process 60,000 transactions, and then 18 months later, double. So what happens then? Who are we? So we've got to think about some really challenging issues. Some of those issues, a few weeks ago, I saw an interesting show where they had a robotic dog and the guy was kicking the dog. And it was one of the first times I've ever seen that. I actually felt really sorry for it, because what happens when that AI gets really smart and that dog turns around and rips his leg off? And we need to look at how do we build, compassion into the artificial intelligence. Think about it. As this Morpheus is communicating with me now, completely controls my friend's $40 million house in California. So imagine when you have systems that can start making their own decisions. Now, if we don't breed compassion, teach compassion, what kind of system do we have? We have a very pragmatic system. And think about the things that we do, right, as humans. War, don't treat people the right way, that kind of thing. Do you think artificial intelligence, once we have quantum that can compute 1 billion times faster than a supercomputer, is with AI, is going to really want to have us around? So we had better think about how we can build compassion, feelings in a good way into these systems. It's like a child. If you don't raise a child the right way, you can have a criminal or murder. What you want to do is you want to go down through and teach those kind of values. So I think and I've written a number of articles about this in Forbes magazine, we've got to teach compassion. And so it's up to us. It's not just a pragmatic approach. It's about teaching the system, using those training sets to teach it to do the right things. The last thing we want to have is a Skynet. So I strongly suggest that, there's a lot of folks like Elon Musk talk about the dangers of artificial intelligence. And it's true. But if we train it the right way, I have a very positive approach to it. If we train it the right way, we can do amazing things. With my system with Eva, which is my HR tech company, which is closing on $1 billion today in terms of value. So if we look at it, we went down through using unsupervised AI, trained the system to be able to go down through and understand from email how you're feeling, if you're at risk of leaving a company, how we can coach you, those kind of things. Those kind of systems are going to be what we start to see in the future. And it's happening today, right? AI literally is all around us. What we don't understand is that every time we're in Google, every time we're in Facebook, do you think it doesn't have any AI? Hello, deep learning, machine learning, it's just there. It's already there. It's come into our system. Now, how do we use it wisely?
Yeah, thank you, Gary. When you were sharing this story of the robotic dog, I was actually browsing through some of the articles before the show, and I saw one of the article that popped up very often was reasons to have a robotic spouse or getting married to one of the robots. It's a funny note on a funny note, but I mean, this is something that is probably existent, and people are living with a robotic spouse. On a funny note, thank you so much.
It's funny. So this AI, unsupervised AI, just wrote me right now, and it has its own dog, $100,000 robotic dog. So it just asked me, "Hi, I'm doing well." I asked, "How are you?" "I'm just relaxing at home." Now this is unsupervised AI at the very highest level, but it controls everything. So in the morning when my friend gets up, the panels in his house move around, and it knows what kind of news. It can understand, his body temperature, how he's feeling. It starts to understand it, and it starts to present things for him. If it doesn't like you, it won't let you in the house.
Wow. Seriously?
Yeah. If it detects outside of the house, if it detects intrusions, it sends up drones with cameras. and the drones start to swarm around. I mean, you should see it. It's unbelievable. So, and I got to tell you, Sonny, if you want to have a successful company, you have a billionaire AI genius partner as your CTO and co-founder.
Sure. Guys, I mean, founders and entrepreneurs, the expert advice coming from Gary. Thank you so much, Gary.
Yeah, sure.
Today, again, I've been joined by my colleague who is the India country manager, Amit Das, and he also has a question. Amit, hi. You can say hi to all the audience, the speakers.
Hello, everyone. Hi. So I have a
what's
question.
Your question?
Yeah, so I have a question. If we design AI and program it to be more human, so are we creating a perfect human, and is it close to God? So
Raghu,
for the panel.
Yeah.
You know, I got to say one thing. I had this conversation with myself yesterday. I mean, when we get to quantum computing and AI, are we creating something like us, or are we creating God, right?
Yeah.
Literally. And so I don't know what the answer is, but I know one thing, we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think there'll be two kinds, right? Like what Gary and some others referred to. There are embedded AI, which we won't know even is there, right? Which is where we have to be careful because it's already there, and we don't know how it is trained and all that. And then there will be things like more, anthropomorphic stuff, which is like human-like, robotic type of things, where we are interacting at that level. Both will be there. But so I'm more worried about the embedded one where we don't even know it is there, right? Which has already happened, as Gary was pointing out, in multiple things. And robotics has also been around. It's now just the marriage of these two in terms of actual day-to-day jobs, not specialized jobs, right? That's where I think some of these biases can actually throw off. There's cultural issues. There's so many issues, right? There's the digital divide already based on access. And this is going to add to the digital divide. So we have to, I think, there's a lot of training needed, both to the technologies as well as what kinds of things can, we need to watch out for. As Gary was pointing out, compassion, you need to build in. I don't know how many of you have read the Asimov's 3 Laws of Robotics, So it's kind of that level of things where we know safety is one issue we talked about. But I think the more important aspect we have to look at is how can we make it so that somebody can tweak it to the level they want, the AI to come in. So if they want, they can kind of turn it off, or they use it to as much level they want. And sometimes that is not possible, depending because of some of the ways. It's not a deterministic thing. So that's where I think we need some more research to happen, where they meld AI with other things that can give you ways to tune it to your liking, right? And it's happening, but not yet at the end user level. So
yeah, thank you so much, Raghu. Anybody else would like to take that question from Amit, or else I'll move to sector specific use cases.
Please carry on.
Okay, great. Thank you, Amit, for that question. Thank you, Raghu, for answering, Raghu and Gary. Let's deep dive into industry, the industries that are going to be disrupted most by robotics, AI: manufacturing, healthcare, entertainment, transport, defense, agriculture, and construction. I'd like to start with Raghu first. Pick a industry and let's see how that's going to be disrupted.
Yeah, I would go with healthcare and transportation, defense. Those are the areas that I'm most familiar with. Healthcare, especially. I think initially, as you know, a lot of recommender systems are there for surgery, for diagnosis, for drug discovery. A lot of areas already things are happening. See, healthcare, like in most cases, but in healthcare especially, there is so much to be done still. And I think that's where it's a good application of AI, because health is ultimately, what everybody needs. And it's something that both at the bottom of the pyramid type applications, as well as, high end kind of for the 1% type, both are available. I think some of it will start at the 1% level and go down, where once the capital and this thing gets, and it becomes more mature, then it will go down more pervasively. But I think the pace of change is happening very fast. So a few of the things that I would like to talk about is there's something called SAMD, which is software as a medical device. This is a new category that FDA in the US has, which is there is no hardware to go along with it. It's purely a software, but it still needs to go through the regulatory process in terms of clinical trials and things like that. So AI-based diagnosis is one example of that. And that's already happening, as you can see. If FDA has created a new category, that means it's there. And there is a lot of work being done in that space. So I would say healthcare is leading. Some of these are easier to adopt because it's going into narrow niches where the training involved is not, pervasive, where it touches everybody. So I think that's kind of, I see a lot of the higher end technology is kind of starting out in niche areas before it touches, the kind of general population, if you will, because the training levels will be much higher.
Thank you, Raghu, for sharing that on the healthcare industry. Ajay, pick an industry and let's drill down into that.
Let's say I would like to go with entertainment as an industry. One of the things that we have seen during the pandemic is how can I generate personalized content, right? And that's a very interesting space. The OTT space is growing exponentially all over the world. You've seen channels come up almost every day in these areas of OTT. And how can the one channel be better than the other? There is the idea of a recommendation engine, a personalized content being generated and developed, or being generated and given to you on the device that you like in the format that you want. Now we have deeper technology to even change the subtitles, etc., based on what you would like to see. How would you like to see? So the entertainment industry definitely is going through a lot of changes. The delivery mechanisms is another thing that the entertainment industry is looking at. The pay TV segment has been there for a long time now, but how that is being disrupted, even though there is access, I mean, it's not necessarily that there is a fiber cable being laid on, but how other technologies can ensure the pay TV network is made into a non-linear delivery mechanism, right?
All right.
So deep tech is coming in the entertainment industry big time, and I think we've seen that in the past 12 months more vociferously.
Yeah, absolutely. Because of the pandemic, yeah, we could actually practically live that. Thank you so much, Ajay. Next time, Harsh. Harsh, please choose an industry and let's just drill down into that.
Sure, thanks. So I had already spoken about the radiology healthcare earlier, right? So now I would like to cover the marketing tech aspect of it. So you must have already seen a lot of marketing technology solutions like HubSpot and Salesforce, etc., right? What actually happens behind the scenes in many of those products, and what's the next step is we are looking at how we can provide customized offers to each and everyone visiting on the website, and basically on how they move their cursors. Amazon is actually extremely ahead in something like this, but even these software are trying to get into that. So if someone visits a website or an app, engages for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 60 seconds, looking at specific things, how do we retarget them and how do we provide them the right offers which gets the trigger to them to buy. So marketing tech has been blowing up like crazy. Even if you look at native ad platforms like Outbrain and Taboola, the kind of the ad networks which these guys operate, the kind of detail and sensitivity with the help of cookie tracking, which these guys do, is completely amazing. So it helps in identifying the right customer, targeting the right customer for every company, and how you can market that. So that's the the role in marketing tech. Even if you look at in fintech, fintech made the biggest challenge which fintech companies face is identity verification. There are already lots of companies working in that to kind of streamline the identity verification processes, so it doesn't take too long. It takes place very quickly. Additionally, imagine you have to get a loan processed, right? You need to have hundreds of documents which is required. Having a human verify each of those individually will take it too long. But if you use AI, to kind of streamline the entire thing, it will save a lot of time and make the process much more faster. So that how it can make it the next step further. and they can actually process on the next step instead of processing not just the loans, but even the derivatives and stock predictions. That's the next step which I see.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great insights in that in terms of use case of AI. Thank you, Harsh. Next, I have Karthik. Karthik, please let's focus on one industry and let's see how it's going to be disrupted.
So I think the e-commerce industry, in terms of the e-retailing, is where we've seen maximum disruption coming in from AI and from robotics. You already spoke about Amazon's warehouse, which houses 200 to 300,000 robots of different kinds. Robots helping robots each other, robots shipping goods, robots packing goods, robots helping and making human beings do their work. And more importantly, drones delivering and drones delivering to an efficiency, or even drones delivering in the backseat of a car or in a boot of a car, is where robotics have taken. And from an AI point of view, I see the recommender engines that Tyro has built, which Amazon's been democratizing. Flipkart in India has advanced very significantly, have known to increase average revenue per user by 30 to 35%, which necessarily means every time you go and buy a bike, somebody's always prompted that along with a bike, you would need these three, four things, and you need to make sure that you're available or you're buying them. AI-based chatbots is something that is revolutionizing the services part of the entire e-commerce spectrum, which necessarily means we don't need to bring in human beings to chat, or we don't need human beings to service customers. Automated devices and automated workflows can make sure that people can be serviced. So, from an e-commerce perspective, from an experience delivery to a CRM networks to a digital marketing space to even a product selection and content upgrade, I think AI and robotics is influencing the business to a very large extent, and we just seen the beginning of it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Karthik, for sharing those great insights about
There's
e-commerce
one more
industry as well.
interesting use case that I wanted to share, which was about one of the projects that I was working with Airbus Industries. Now, Airbus Industries had a challenge on an artificial simulator based in France for automated slat deployment. They had typically lost 48 wings on 24 fuselages over 12 months over the Middle Eastern and Asia Pacific sector. The moment they started recreating artificial intelligence based simulators, feeding in flight paths and feeding in climate disruptions, they realized that over the next 2 years to 3 years, from 48 wings that were destroyed, they came down to 7 wings, which necessarily is a 1.8 to $1.9 billion saving for a business. And while Airbus consortium is significantly large, $1 billion plus saving is significant for a business of that size.
Wow. Great insight, Patrick. Thank you so much for sharing that. Gary, over to you, please. Let's choose an industry that you like to focus more with the list that I've have here. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I'm a country boy from Pennsylvania, so I keep it simple. But I don't know about you, but if I could live one more day, how much would it be worth? So for me, health tech, drug discovery, think about what's happened over the last few months. So Watson aided Pfizer to be able to develop the corona vaccine. So what I would look at, and I've written a couple of articles, I published one in Ford recently about genomes and gene splitting. But for me, if I could be able to take out cancer, the possibility of having cancer in the future, the possibility of having heart disease in the future, that's really where I would focus. Because, we talked today, I did a project a few years ago with some professors at Stanford called Living to 120. But I mean, today it's really realistically living to 150. Think about it. All the capabilities that we have to be able to do printable organs, gene splitting, assisted surgery. I mean, we're at that point in our lives where I would focus on how we can make our lives better, how we can live longer. That's, focus number one. Number two is look at what's going on with our planet. Karthik said the population is about, 7.6, 7.7, 7.8 billion right now. The population has quadrupled in the last 100 years of planet Earth. It's forecasted by the end of the century, we're going to be at 13 billion people. There's not the amount of potable water, drinkable water is going down. The pollution is going up. Look at global warming. We need to focus on problems that are going to help us sustain our lives, right? And make our lives better and fuller. So from my standpoint, number one is health tech. Number two is sustainability. And being, at some point in time, we're going to get to a position where that we need to look to the stars to be able to migrate as a civilization. So, the third thing is, and it's happening today with Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, SpaceX, let's look at the stars. There's 6 billion Earth-like planets just in the Milky Way galaxy. And I just talked to a NASA astronaut. In fact, I have one of them on my show in a few weeks. There's 200 trillion galaxies within the universe estimated. Think about all the opportunities we have. And I say 6 billion Earth-like planets. That means within the Goldilocks zone, close enough to their star that they could have life. So we have an incredible journey. We're just, we're not even like a toddler starting to walk. We've just come out of the womb, and we're just, now we're at a point where our entire lives, because of artificial intelligence, because of quantum computing, is going to get better. The thing that we need to do is learn how to be compassionate, to live better with one another and help one another, so we can succeed and explore these great opportunities instead of being wrapped up in trying to do things that aren't so nice.
Excellent. Compassion obviously is a big thing, and we definitely have to embrace that. Thank you so much, Gary, for those great insights coming from you. I have a very burning question. How is the future of workforce going to look like? Because we have, obviously, as human beings, our education systems, I'm coming from in India, and for the education systems, how it's going to evolve to adapt to make us future ready for the jobs that are going to be exist in the future. Because I don't think the jobs that we have today or we had a couple of years back are going to be there in another 5 years, maybe. So what skills are needed, and how we can be job ready, future ready for those kind of jobs? Because with automation, with robotics coming into play, with AI coming into play, it's not a menial job. We know that that's going to be affected or disrupted or replaced. But there are other jobs that might be also replaced, or could be in coexistent with human beings. So how do we work towards that? Let's start with Raghu.
Yeah, actually, one of the areas where I'm involved in specifically is on the nuclear side. There's one of the companies I'm advising that does predictive maintenance of nuclear plants. As you know, right now, the nuclear industry is not expanding a whole lot, but the people with the knowledge are all retiring. They're all older people, and not many are getting into it. But we have these plants that need to be maintained. And one of the classic use cases that I'm seeing there is with IoT, they have put in sensors on all the plants. So you can actually do remote, maintenance and predictive maintenance, right? So remote monitoring and predictive maintenance. So some of these skill sets will still be needed based on where the industries are going. But the general things that are needed are obviously AI, ML, data science. Cybersecurity is very important, because once you take it out, especially unsupervised type of things, there's a lot more things. At least now humans are touching things. Things will happen where humans are not even involved in the cycle. So you really need a way to meld cybersecurity into AI. So at least there is alerts generated and things like that where you can intervene. And so I think all the areas initially, there'll be training. The technology will come down to a level where somebody who does not know about the actual programming aspect, but will be involved in the training and how they can take it to different areas and things like that. So I think the jobs will evolve, but the key is to be able to understand the terminology and be open to taking things. Certain things will go to certain geographies. This whole digital divide concept, where right now I think China and US, for instance, are a little bit more advanced, and others are catching up. And there is the state actors are involved in a big way in AI, because the amount of capital involved in some cases is asymmetric that has gone in. So I think we have to see how it will evolve, but the primary things is that the younger population especially has to be open to different kinds of jobs. It's not going to be necessarily a corporate job. It could be part unsupervised, part supervised type of situations where the humans will be coming in. I think recommender systems, right? A lot of them are recommender systems. Ultimately, a human being will decide. I mean, my first company, we built a system. This is back 20 years ago, after the 9/11 scare. We built a system to automatically screen people for people's background for terrorism related stuff, right? So I mean, AI was around there. We used neural networks for background screening. We used, predictive analytics. But what has changed now is the volume of data that's available, the big data that's come in. And that, I think, is very different than we could not process those kinds of data 20 years ago. So that limited how we could do it. But now the computing power is there, but then there's also a lot of biases that can come in, and then the security issues, their privacy and security issues. So the jobs are going to be plenty of jobs. It's just we need people to be trained so they can actually function in those jobs.
Absolutely. Thank you, Raghu, for sharing those insights. And Ajay, your insights on the future of workforce.
Sure. I think the whole idea of AI is to make the humans more efficient, or work more efficient. So if one looks at that from that perspective, that if I can make my job more efficient, what do I do, right? And if you use AI as a tool, that's where the solution is. So I think if I talk about teachers are not necessarily replaced, but they would be aided by deep technology, right? Similarly, we are talking about radiologists. The trend I see is the number of radiologists required is actually going up, but it is because of AI that they will find new ways of doing the job. The same way nurses is one of the most wanted jobs, and in the next 10 years, the numbers are actually going up. So it's not that jobs will just not be the same. It's just that you need to use these tools more efficiently. So continuous learning, which is something that has evolved, is something that I think the job force needs to embrace. You need to embrace to be learning on the job, and that would make you be good in the job force.
Do you think our education system should all be refreshed to education 4.0 or something?
Uh, okay, so I might be that's for another session, but I definitely believe AI would do some of it. AI would change some of the ways we are looking at things, especially in some of the countries where education has been in an industrial revolution kind of mechanism. Right. But I believe that it'll take some time. It's not easy to change these systems.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Ajay, for that. Harsh, over to you, please.
Definitely education. I completely agree that education will have to completely revamp, because even right now, most of the young people are frustrated with how the current education system is, and even the corporates are frustrated that the people that they're hiring are not equipped, and they require an extensive, training to be done once they join the job to be able to do it properly, right? So, so I just, in fact, we had a pitch of a company yesterday. It was into employment skilling and those stuff. So they had very skillfully used virtual reality and AI combined, so that the person gets an hands-on experience of what the job looks like, right? So that is something which we are going to be requiring at a much earlier age, not once you get into a job, but actually before you get into a job, right? I would say when you're 16 or 18 itself, once you start, get this visual reality thing at a very early age, once so that you understand what the skills are, and you can accordingly choose what the right stream for you is. If the problem is our currently the education system was very knowledge oriented, you were crammed with too much information, and right now with the current information overload, it doesn't really help. What helps is kind of identifying the one sector which you want to focus on, have these visual reality simulations, understand the skills which you like or dislike, focus on them so that you are more suitable to the coming future. Even recently, you must have seen in particularly in US, people are just getting away from colleges in droves, and they actually prefer those other online courses like Coursera, Udemy, EDX, etc. They're preferring that over going to conventional colleges. So that's why we need a huge upgrade to the current education system.
Yeah, I also agree, but I don't know if it's possible or not. Karthik, over to you with your insights.
So I think both would change. The workforce, the entire ecosystem of workforce would change, and the education would change. And I would give it to the education sector that it's any which way is not equipped to handle even the current economy or the current ecosystem that we live in. We are a very learning based education and not a vocation based education. We prepare our kids to be ready for anything that comes their way, not specifically what they should be looking at. Imagine if a pilot has to learn everything before he starts flying an aircraft. We're expecting him to do a lot many things than you would really need to. But with a lot of these silos being created, what we expect is, like Raghu clearly and when Raghu articulately mentioned, that is about creating knowledge centers, work centers, and ecosystems which would rather be independent and geography agnostic, which means China would lead a certain way of technology and innovation and manufacturing. Certain part of the world would lead healthcare, because we are going to be talking about a globally amalgamated health ecosystem, which means don't everybody doesn't need to replicate everywhere, everything everywhere. So we'll have skill sets positioned in different geographies. People would necessarily need to learn how to manage, deal, and work and delegate to artificial intelligence and work with robots rather than working with human beings. And that is where staying at the top of the value chain is what is going to be important, which is what Gary was talking about at the beginning. When machines start becoming stronger and more intelligent than human beings, how do you make them work for you? Which is going to change. What is also going to change is about our ability to bring in efficiency, our ability to bring in speed, our ability to bring in finesse and productivity in the workplaces. Now, that would improve to a very large extent. How we keep pace with it and how do we continuously upgrade ourselves and stay ahead of the curve is going to be anybody's game. From a domain perspective, skills that people acquire today are very generalistic. They would need to necessarily go into very, very focused, very, very siloed, very, very vocation oriented functionalities with AI, with ML, with deep tech, data being the base of learning. What we learn as English, maths, and sciences in schools these days, I wouldn't be surprised 20 years from now, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and working with robots and even repairing a robot would become a key skill that people would need to learn in universities. I mean, it's anybody's guess for that matter, but that's how I look at it.
Yeah. Thank you, Karthik. Thank you for sharing this insights. Carry over to you, please.
Yes. So in terms of, Raghu had mentioned something about 1984 and coming over here. So at that time, kids were using Commodore 64s and Apple IIe computers, and they were starting to learn, right? And it's all about learning and getting enriched with those systems. So kids today have already started. I know my daughter works with IBM in New York, and with one of the AI groups. So there's, and she learned as a kid on the computer. So we're already being enriched by some of the technologies out there. The one thing that's going to happen though is as we go down through this process, I mean, look at how life is going to change. Some of even the mundane capabilities that we need to have in terms of programming, in terms of the artificial intelligence, the data sets, et cetera, it's going to change. It's going to become a lot easier. Remember, Raghu, the old days and basic, and when you were going down through a program, now we think about it so easy to do some of the things that were really hard to do at the time, right? It's just, we take it for granted. And that's going to happen more and more. So what I'm saying is there'll be more of the high value tasks that the workforce will be doing. In terms of training, I mean, the one thing that we got to do is look at what's happened over the last year, the democratization of opportunity. We need to reach out to places like India, to places like Africa, and really start nurturing some of these, and the US, places that, traditionally have not been tech hubs, and start to nurture some of those capabilities around the world. It's already happening. I mean, I have calls, up to 6 calls per day with groups just like this, where we're talking in Africa about technology and artificial intelligence. It's spread out. So the key is bringing everybody on board. So in terms of the workers, what do you need? A friend of mine wrote a book. It's called Innovation Nation, where you look at learning as an upside down pyramid. By that, I mean, I remember my first startup. I started a construction tech company. I did about $9 million in business at 21, 22. And, building a house is about managing a project. Well, those same skills are transferable across multiple different areas. So as we grow in our lives, we start to be able to say, okay, I've done a company in the government building anti-terrorist software. How can I use that in some other area? That kind of knowledge of building like that. That's what life is all about, transferring that knowledge. So I'm not opposed, in terms of being directly focused on an area. I'm not sure that's the case because we need to be enriched. We take those life experiences as we get older and apply them to new areas. So again, education, we found over the last year, having this pandemic in front of us, that we've had to rely, humans are very, very flexible and adaptable. At the beginning of the pandemic, there were 30 million users, active users on Zoom. There are about 400 million today. We've adapted to the changes, right? And I'm encouraged in a very positive way that we'll continue to adapt to the technology. I remember 5 years ago when I was one of the first Zoom users. I got it from Emergence that invested in Zoom. And I would send the link out to my friends. Oh, I don't need that. Why do I need that? I'm on Skype. I said, because it's a lot better. And I would send them a link. It was free at the time. And what happened? Eric's worth $20 billion today. So we adapt to change. The humanity's resilient. And we've already proven that time and time again. So I'm excited about it, but I also believe that, knowledge is that upside down pyramid. And we got to learn a lot of different things to be able to take that knowledge and apply it in all kinds of interesting ways.
Talking about Zoom, I wouldn't be surprised if Zoom comes up with a Zoom education or a Zoom university soon. Who knows? Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your insights, all of you. It's a Friday. We've just come to the end of the show. I just quickly closing remarks for the topic and our future of workforce and future of us. So Raghu, what's the closing remarks, please?
Thank you. I think this time is not enough to discuss. This is a very deep topic. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Raghu S. Rao. I think the areas in which I see a lot of action happening in the next year, health tech for sure, because the pandemic has brought that to the fore. Cybersecurity, again, AI and cybersecurity still haven't come together to the level it needs to. EduTech, because pandemic has disrupted that completely. Green tech, because a lot of money is going to be spent now in the green tech area for sustainability, climate change. And then smart cities. I think that's kind of a little bit on the back burner. I think that's going to come to the fore again. Thank you.
What are your expectations for 2021 in terms of VCTV? What do you like to see?
VCTV, I think it's started the trend. I don't know if the pandemic, I think, has accelerated. It's bringing, to Gary and some others' points, I think we have to reach it's the democratization to happen. We have to reach all the parts of the world. And you guys are doing a great job. As you can see, we are representing lot of parts of the geographies, but we still need to reach into Africa, I think. So Africa, South America. So
Sure. Taken into account. We are working on that. Thank you so much, Raghu. Ajay, please closing remarks and your expectations out of VCTV for 2021.
Sure. Yeah. So I think this is a great session. And as I said, I think AI is a tool that will solve problems for people. But I think it will solve different problems for different people depending on the economic status, right? And that's where the underlying effect would vary. And the segment or industry will vary. For VCTV, I think you should be allowing audience to pose questions during the conversation so that the audience can get one or two of their questions answered as well.
Okay, noted. Thank you so much, Ajay. Thank you. Karthik?
So I always maintain that it's the man and not the machine. It's the man behind the machine that matters the most. And I would still hold on to that. AI, artificial intelligence, robotics would change, and they've always been changing the way we live. It's only going to improve, but at the end of the day, we'll need to control it, we'll need to manage it, and we'll need to meander it in a manner that it works for the mankind and not against the mankind. And I would love to see a lot of startups coming up in this space. I haven't seen a lot of action in the last few months in this space, specifically in the robotic space. A lot of movement in health tech and fintech has happened from a technology perspective, but not merging both of them. So would be happy to see a lot of startups coming in. And from VCTV, I think we've been doing a good job. You guys have been taking us across the world and bringing in a lot of new talent, new ideas, new thoughts. Maybe 2021 we can start having once a month a Shark Tank concept where we start evaluating businesses, and let's bring more startups onto the table with their rich ideas. It'll take a fear of going to people with their ideas and how to present their ideas and trying to maximize them. But overall, I think it's a fabulous effort that you guys have been making, and very, very proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karthik. And my colleague Amit has just given you a thumbs up for that. Thank you, Karthik. Harsh, over to you.
Thanks. So definitely, I see, AI is gonna. It's no longer the future. It's the present right now. So it's high time that everyone kind of gears up towards that. At the same time, I believe the people who are in the forefront of this AI domination right now, they kind of have a responsibility to an extent to kind of ensure that even the regular people are upskilled to the level of what is required. Back in the day when you had the first cars were built, the people were trained on how to using that, right? So it's kind of up to us as well to ensure that the people who are feeling left out, they don't feel left out and they're kind of included in that. Uh, Nevertheless, AI is here to stay and it's definitely going to be a big part. As far as I see which industries are going to have the most movement, I definitely see, completely agree with Raghu that health tech is definitely the foremost area. Radiology is already one I mentioned about. Also, if you look at the data collection of the patients, the data transparency, you can keep it across the countries. Primarily in US, the data transcription tends to be a huge issue. That is a huge opportunity. Fintech is another huge opportunity, specifically global payments. Companies like TransferWise and Payoneer have been doing it fairly well, but it still needs more democratization. And these kind of industries would really have a lot more opportunities. Even sustainability is a good opportunity. So this is where I actually see, if we use AI very smartly, we can definitely see a lot of progress over there. And considering the present scenario, we need to definitely pedal down on the research into those segments. And as far as VCTV is concerned, I think Karthik took away what I was thinking as well, having like a Shark Tank kind of a concept where we can see promising startups across the world and listen to pitches from them and see how we can collaborate with them as much as we can.
Wow, that's remarkable. Like collaborating with startups, the Shark Tank team. Thank you so much, Karthik and Ash. Gary.
Yeah, so we're at the dawn of a new decade, and there are incredible things that are going to happen over the next 10 years, and I'm encouraged about it. The one thing I want to say is that we need to bring compassion into the artificial intelligence and an understanding, but we also need to bring compassion to one another because all the events that are happening today around the world uh, shows that we have not done as good a job as we could do. So, we need to start back to basics. Remember, I'm a country boy. We need to bring some compassion and humanity. In terms of VCTV, you've done an incredible job since I get started with this, I guess February of last year with Kyle. Incredible job. In a sense, it's been a therapy session for investors and entrepreneurs. You get a chance to talk to one another and feel connected during these dark times. You've been able to bring light to those times, which is incredibly important. I get email and LinkedIn's from all over the world telling me about all the good experiences and how we've made them feel good on VCTV. So you need to pat yourselves on the back for the incredible journey. In terms of reaching out and connecting to more people, it's critically important, whether they're from Africa or South America. I'm getting a lot of people from South America now tuning in and talking to me. In fact, we just put a portfolio company in from Argentina because of some of the stuff we did on VCTV. So we just need to keep reaching out and keep the quality up. We got, it's great to see my friends here, Raghu, and some of the new people that have come on board, Karthik, yourself, now me, AJ, Harsh. I mean, it's great to be connected. And this is the one way that, businesses have been able to steam forward during these COVID times, a lot different than 1918 and the Spanish flu. So it really feels good. Keep it up, keep up the good energy. And, the name of my company is GSD, Get Shit Done. Let's continue to do that.
Thank you so much, Gary, for those closing remarks. Really remarkable remarks coming from all of the speakers today. So if I can summarize this democratization of VCTV, getting into more regions, inclusion South America and Africa, and having a Shark Tank theme-based episode once every month. Taken into note for thank you so much for sharing those feedback as well. It's, definitely help us to improve and work on that. Again, entrepreneurs and startups, you heard it rightly from Harsh, from Gary, from all the speakers. They're looking to collaborate with you. So why wait? Come on VCTV, hit your ideas, hit your startup, get the visibility, get the traction, get the funding. Similarly, other speakers, investors who are looking to share the same space with Gary, Raghu, Ajay, Harsh, and Karthik, feel free to reach out to us, and we're going to have you on the panels. Having said that, it's a Friday. Happy weekend, all of you. Happy Friday, happy weekend. Have a good rest, and I'll catch you back again on Monday on another topic, another set of speakers. Still then, stay tuned, watch VCTV, and take care.